Hi, hello, and welcome to my channel. Reading has always been something that's been a part of my life. I haven't read consistently my entire life, but reading has definitely always been a hobby. It's actually one of the only things and the very first thing that I can remember as a kid like wanting to learn. So I thought it would be fun to kind of go down memory lane together and do basically a series of videos, and each video in the series would feature a book from my childhood where I would not only read that book but also read like the adult equivalent to that book. And I figured the very first video that I would do in this series would be Goosebumps because not only are we in the season for it, but also, if my memory serves me correctly, Goosebumps I think was like one of the very first book series that I got into and I really liked. And I do actually have 3 separate books for this particular video. Not only do we have our Goosebumps book, but we also actually have a young adult and an adult book to read as well, because the author of Goosebumps is R.L. Stine. I feel like we all know that. But also he does have a very lengthy, very Goosebumps-esque young adult series called Fear Street. So I thought it'd be kind of fun and unique to be able to kind of read the progression of ages within the same author's writing. Fear Street seems to have kind of like sub-series within the main Fear Street series, and this is the one called True Evil, and it's basically a trilogy about cheerleaders. And honestly, the main reason I got this one was because I just thought the cover was really fun, and this book in particular actually has all 3 of the True Evil books within this one book. So I don't think I'm actually going to read all 3 of them for this video, but I am going to read at least the first one, obviously. Also, the print in this book is humongous, so maybe I will read it all. But also, like I said, I do want to read like an adult version of this type of book. So I did pick up a horror book by Nick Cutter, and this one is called The Troop. And I decided to go with this book particularly because these 2 books I think have kind of the same theming. It was the closest that I could find. The Goosebumps book that I ended up picking is called Ghost Camp, and as you can see from the cover, it does kind of have like a summer camp vibe. And our adult book has theming around a scoutmaster bringing a troop of boys into the Canadian wilderness, and I'm very interested to see how kind of like similar they are. It's kind of like a, if you read this as a kid, try this as an adult kind of a thing, and I'm very, very excited. I actually ended up thrifting this book a while back when I first kind of started developing this idea, and I ended up paying $4 freaking for this book. Also too, by the way, once I'm done with these books, the kids books specifically, I do plan on putting them in the little free libraries that are around my area. At first I was a little annoyed that I paid $4 for this because I was hoping by thrifting it I would get it for like 50 cents or something. But then I remembered that free libraries exist, and the idea of a kid being able to read this for free makes me happy. The thrift store that I got this from did have a selection of quite a few different ones, and I did make sure that I actually got one that I didn't read as a kid. So this book specifically is completely new to me, but also the synopsis is way like gorier than I freaking remember these books being. I definitely was scared by them. Like, it was kind of like a fun, like, ooh, this is kind of creepy, but this is actually kind of gory, and I'm a little shocked. So the back of the book says, Harry and his brother Alex are dying to fit in at Camp Spirit Moon, but the camp has so many weird traditions, like the goofy camp salute, the odd camp greeting, and the way the old campers love to play jokes on the new campers. Then the jokes start to get really serious, really creepy, really scary. First a girl sticks her arm in the campfire, then a boy jams a pole through his foot. Still, they're just jokes, right? Reader beware, you're in for a scare. That was really shocking to me. I was not expecting it to be so gruesome. This book is a total of 118 pages, but it is a children's book, so the font is rather large, and I'm guessing this is going to take me all of like maybe an hour to read. I'm actually kind of curious to see how long it does take me, so I'm going to set a timer. Suspected, it took me basically an hour to read this book. Specifically, it was an hour and 13 minutes, and overall I feel like this was pretty cute. Thankfully, it wasn't nearly as gory as the back of the book made it sound like it could be, because again, it is a children's book. Also, that being said, you can definitely tell it was a children's book because it did repeat itself a lot, and the story overall was pretty simple and Obviously not at all scary, but I do feel like if I read this as a kid, like the brothers in the story, they're 11 and 12. If I was that age reading this, I feel like I would have been terrified. As an adult, I'm definitely not going to continue reading these, but it does definitely make me like more excited to get into the young adult version. So last night, I actually ended up reading quite a bit of this book. I only meant to read like a little bit of it to kind of give myself like a head start for today, but I ended up actually reading almost the entirety of the first book. I'm currently on page 182, which is the start of chapter 24, and there's literally only this much left until the next book. So I'm gonna finish reading this, and then we'll be back in a second to talk about it.
So high I'm hypnotized. What's up is down, what's left is right. Chasing stars and holding.
Alright, so let's go ahead and talk Fear Street, True Evil by R.L. Stein. So the first book is about two sisters named Bobby and Corky, which are very interesting names. And basically the two sisters move into a new town onto Fear Street, and they want to try out for the cheerleading squad because they were cheerleaders at their other school, and apparently they're like really good. And a few of the girls on the squad are not super happy with them being able to try out. They don't really want them to. They don't think it's fair, but the cheer captain, Jennifer, allows them to do it anyway, and they end up making the squad. And essentially the rest of the book is about weird things that are happening to the members of this cheer squad. Now, as far as the actual comparison to Goosebumps, you can definitely tell that these are written by the same person, and this one does definitely have a very similar vibe, but older. For example, the things that the back of the book talked about, like the girl sticking her arm in the campfire and the boy jamming a pole in his foot, like those things happened in this book, but they weren't like taken to a gory level, which again, I was relieved for a children's book. But this one, when it came to things like that, did not hold back, and I really liked that. This is categorized as a young adult, I'm pretty sure. I couldn't really specifically find it anywhere that it said that, but it definitely does have more young adult writing, I think, like a kind of more juvenile feel versus even other young adult books that I've read, honestly. So that being said, again, I do recommend it. If you liked Goosebumps, give them a shot. And I am definitely going to finish this book, but I don't know that I would continue reading more of the Fear Street series. I might pick it up from the library, but it's not something that I would purchase, if that makes sense. Anyway, let's go ahead and move on to our actual adult comparison book, which I'm honestly so excited for. As I mentioned in the beginning of this video, our adult version of our Goosebumps book is going to be The Troop by Nick Cutter. And again, because our Goosebumps book is about a summer camp, I wanted our adult book to have the same type of theme. And this one seems to fit the bill. It's about a scoutmaster who leads a troop of boys into the Canadian wilderness for a weekend camping trip. But then it also says, but when an unexpected intruder stumbles upon their campsite, shockingly thin, disturbingly pale, and ferociously hungry, Tim and the boys are exposed to something far more frightening than any tale of terror, the human carrier of a bioengineered nightmare, a horror that spreads faster than fear, a harrowing struggle for survival with no escape from the elements, the infected, or one another. When I was looking for books for this video, I looked this one up on Barnes & Noble, and a lot of the reviews for this book were not very positive. A lot of people were saying that it was gore for gore's sake, and that kind of made me nervous. But then this morning, I was looking at Goodreads. I saw that it actually had a pretty good review, I think, or like overall star rating on Goodreads. I think it was like 3.89 or something like that. And I saw that a lot of the top reviews were all 5 stars. One of them was a 5-star review that just said, this book, which I thought was hilarious. Another one said, I've read this book 3 times. I've been horrified each and every time. This shit is my idea of true balls to the freaking wall horror. Another 5-star review says, color me nauseous, which is funny. And I think kind of like leans into what the Barnes & Noble reviews were saying, where a lot of them were talking about how gory this book was. Which kind of makes me nervous. And then there was this one that said, disclaimer, to be honest, I worry that when I rate a horror novel at 5 stars, people will actually read them and think I'm a psycho. Please don't read this book unless you've read a lot of horror and you know what you're doing. In the genre of horror, this book is aces, top tier. So that's definitely a positive review, but As I've mentioned before and recently, I am very new to horror. I think I've only read a couple of horror books in my entire life, one of which was a Stephen King book when I was in like middle school, and it terrified me. Like I couldn't read it at night. So now I'm kind of like very excited, but also a little nervous about what I'm about to get into. I've not been reading very long at all. I'm literally only on page 15, but I'm already like so impressed with the writing of this book. The author has a really cool, unique way of like describing things, and already there has been several occasions where the author has taken something relatively mundane or maybe weird, but not like that weird, and made it gross. The book opens up with an article called "The Hungry Man of Prince County," and it basically talks about how this guy went into this diner and ate 5 Hungry Man breakfasts, which consist of 4 eggs, 3 buttermilk pancakes, 5 rashers of bacon, sausage links, and toast. So each breakfast has all of those things, and he ate 5 of them. And at the end of the article it says, "Something evil is afoot in sleepy Prince County. No man can be that hungry." And then right after that you get chapter 1, which is kind of in the perspective of the hungry man of Prince County. And he basically has an insatiable hunger. Like he cannot eat enough. There's actually a part in that first chapter where he's regretting not eating a roadkill raccoon because he's like so hungry. And that kind of leads me into where I'm at right now, where he's basically crawled up onto the beach where the scoutmaster and the campers are, and it says, "Skittering along its exoskeleton glossed in the moonlight, a sand crab. His hand closed over it, its ocean coldness wept into his flesh, and stuffed it between his lips. He felt it dancing along his tongue with its hairy little legs. He bit down. A gout of salty goo squirted in his mouth. Its pincers snipped the tip of his tongue in a death spasm, bringing the penny-bright taste of blood. He swallowed the twitching bits, the spiny exoskeleton tearing into the soft tissue of his throat, which felt so thin now, nothing but a fleshy drain pipe." I don't know if me reading that out loud was like as impactful as when I first read it, but everything this guy writes has been like that. I'm just really impressed with the writing and very excited. Although I will say, again, me being grossed out already is not boding well for when the actual real stuff starts happening. I totally intended on reading the majority of the book, if not finishing it yesterday, but I got distracted by other things, and then when I went to bed, I could not for the life of me keep my eyes open. So I have basically spent all morning and all day so far, it's like 1 o'clock, finishing this book, and this is definitely not like anything else that I have ever read. Don't even know exactly like what to say about this book. I did tab a couple of things to talk about, so I guess we'll start there. So first off, on page 212 to 213, that was kind of like the first time where I got really creeped out, I guess. It's more of a horror book that's like gross versus scary. Like there's no part of this in the entirety of reading it that I got scared. But again, on page 212 to 213, that whole situation and then the continuation of it from that moment forward, that is what really creeped me out, I guess, or like really was like, took it to a level that made me a little uncomfy. But then also within that same scenario on those 2 pages, I feel like another sort of monster was produced, and that one to me was scarier than everything else that had happened in the book so far. But then, very unexpectedly, our other little tabby that we have is page 223, and I actually almost cried, which also leads me to a little bit of a trigger warning. I did see this in a lot of people's reviews, but there is violence toward animals in this book, like throughout the entire thing. The majority of it honestly didn't bother me too much because at the end of the day I know this is all fiction, and honestly in this scenario on page 223 it does involve an animal, but it's not the animal that made me sad. It was the person involved in this situation. I mean, I felt sad for the animal as well, but like more so for the trauma of the situation in general, what was going on. Also too, what I thought was fun about the writing is interspersed between like the chapters, there is different interviews, news articles, journal entries, that kind of thing, that all have to do kind of like with what's happening to the Scoutmaster and the boys that are trapped on this island. One of which actually ended up giving you a little bit of a spoiler, which for me was kind of annoying. I kind of wish they hadn't done that because it was like in the middle of the book. It was very far from being over, but it told you kind of the end result of the book a little bit. But all of that being said, I actually really enjoyed this book. This definitely didn't go in any kind of direction or way that I thought it was going to, and I actually really liked that because it kept me on my toes, and it was just interesting, like an interesting concept. Because I'm not very familiar with horror books, I don't even know how to like rate it as far as like a star rating. Right now I'm thinking like 4 for like writing, but also I wasn't really scared, but it did make me feel things because I did get grossed out and I did almost cry. So I don't know, I'm kind of thinking like 4.5 stars for this potentially. I'm definitely very interested in reading more from Nick Cutter. I know there's a book called The Deep, and a friend of mine has actually read that and she said she really liked it. So I think I might get that soon and read that as well because I am really a fan of Nick Cutter's writing. I think he just has a really cool, unique way of describing things, making things sound way grosser than they need to be. And for a gory horror book, it's perfect. So anyway, I guess with that is everything that I have for this video. This was such a fun video to film. I loved walking down memory lane with our Goosebumps book and then moving on into Fear Street. And I do feel like The Troop was definitely a jump from those 2 books, but that's kind of what I was looking for. I wanted kind of like an adult version of something to kind of creep me out, and I definitely feel like Mr. Nick Cutter achieved that. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you have had the most amazing of days, and I will hopefully see you guys in the next one. Bye.